The Chronicles of Narnia by C.S. Lewis. Book 4. The Silver Chair. Chapter 11. In the Dark Castle. When the meal, which was pigeon pie, cold ham, salad, and cakes, had been brought, and all had drawn their chairs up to the table and begun, the knight continued, "You must understand, friends, that I know nothing of who I was and whence I came into this dark world. I remember no time when I was not dwelling, as now, at the court of this all but heavenly queen. But my thought is that she saved me from some evil enchantment and brought me hither of her exceeding bounty. Honest Frogfoot, your cup is empty. Suffer me to refill it. And this seems to me the likelier, because even now I am bound by a spell from which my lady alone can free me. Every night there comes an hour when my mind is most horribly changed, and after my mind, my body. For first I become furious and wild, and would rush upon my dearest friends to kill them, if I were not bound. And soon after that I turn into the likeness of a great serpent, hungry, fierce, and deadly. Sir, be pleased to take another breast of pigeon, I entreat you." So they tell me, and they certainly speak truth, for my lady says the same. I myself know nothing of it, for when my hour is past, I awake forgetful of all that vile fit, and in my proper shape and sound mind, saving that I am somewhat wearied. Little lady, eat one of these honey cakes, which are brought for me from barbarous lands in the far south of the world. Now the Queen's Majesty knows by her art that I shall be freed from this enchantment when once has made me king of a land in the overworld and set its crown upon my head. The land is already chosen, in the very place of our breaking out. Her earthmen have worked day and night digging away beneath it, and have now gone so far and so high that they tunnel not a score of feet beneath the very grass on which the updwellers of that country walk. It will be very soon now that those updwellers' fate will come upon them. She herself is at the diggings tonight, and I expect a message to go to her. Then the thin roof of earth which still keeps me from my kingdom will be broken through, and with her to guide me and 1,000 earthmen at my back, I shall ride forth in arms, fall suddenly on our enemies, slay their chief men, cast down their strong places, and doubtless be their crowned king within 24 hours. "It's a bit rough luck on them, isn't it?" said Scrub. "Thou art a lad of wondrous quick-working wit," exclaimed the knight. "For on my honor, I had never thought of it so before. I see your meaning." He looked slightly, very slightly, troubled for a moment or two, but his face soon cleared, and he broke out with another of his loud laughs. "But fie on gravity! Is not the most comical and ridiculous thing in the world to think of them all going about their business and never dreaming that under their peaceful fields and floors, only a fathom down, there is a great army ready to break out upon them like a fountain, and they never to have suspected? Why, they themselves, when once the first smart of their defeat is over, can hardly choose but laugh at the thought." "I don't think it's funny at all," said Jill. "I think you'll be a wicked tyrant." "What?" said the knight, still laughing and patting her head in a quite infuriating fashion. "Is our little maid a deep politician? But never fear, sweetheart. In ruling that land, I shall do all by the counsel of my lady, who will then be my queen, too. Her word shall be my law, even as my word will be law to the people we have conquered." "Where I come from," said Jill, who was disliking him more every minute, "they don't think much of men who are bossed about by their wives." "Shalt think otherwise when thou hast a man of thy own, I warrant you," said the knight, apparently thinking this very funny. "But with my lady it is another matter. I am well content to live by her word, who has already saved me from 1,000 dangers. No mother has taken pains more tenderly for her child than the Queen's grace has for me. Why, look you, amid all her cares and business, she rideth out with me in the overworld many a time, and oft to accustom my eyes to the sunlight. And then I must go fully armed, and with short visor down, so that no man may see my face, and I must speak to no one, for she has found out by art magical that this would hinder my deliverance from the grievous enchantment I am under. Is not that a lady worthy of a man's whole worship?" "Sounds a very nice lady indeed," said Puddleglum in a voice which meant exactly the opposite. They were thoroughly tired of the night's talk before they had finished supper. Puddleglum was thinking, I wonder what game that witch is really playing with this young fool. Scrub was thinking, he's a great baby, really, tied to that woman's apron strings. He's a sap. And Jill was thinking, he's the silliest, most conceited, selfish pig I've met for a long time. But when the meal was over, the knight's mood had changed. There was no more laughter about him. Friends, he said, my hour is now very near. I am ashamed that you shall see me, yet I dread being left alone. They will come in presently and bind me hand and foot to yonder chair. Alas, so it must be, for in my fury, they tell me, I would destroy all that I could reach. I say, said Scrub, I'm awfully sorry about your enchantment, of course, but what will those fellows do to us when they come to bind you? They talked of putting us in prison, and we don't like all those dark places very much. We'd much rather stay here till you're better, if we may. It is well thought of, said the knight. By custom, none but the queen herself remains with me in my evil hour. Such is her tender care for my honor that she would not willingly suffer any ears but her own to hear the words I utter in that frenzy. But I could not easily persuade my attendant gnomes. that you should be left with me, and I think I hear their soft feet even now upon the stairs. Go through yonder door, it leads into my other apartments, and there either await my coming when they have unbound me, or if you will, return and sit with me in my ravings. They followed his directions and passed out of the room by a door which they had not yet seen opened. It brought them, they were pleased to see, not into darkness, but into a lighted corridor. They tried various doors and found, what they very badly needed, water for washing and even a looking-glass. He never offered us a wash before supper, said Jill, drying her face. Selfish, self-centered pig. Are we going back to watch the enchantment, or shall we stay here? Said Scrub. Stay here, I vote, said Jill. I'd much rather not see it. But she felt a little inquisitive all the same. No, go back, said Puddleglum. We may pick up some information, and we need all we can get. I'm quite sure that Queen is a witch and an enemy, and those earthmen would knock us in the head as soon as look at us. There's a stronger smell of danger and lies and magic and treason about this land than I've ever smelled before. We need to keep our eyes and ears open. They went back down the corridor and gently pushed the door open. It's all right, said Scrub, meaning that there were no earthmen about. Then they all came back into the room where they had supped. The main door was now shut, concealing the curtain between which they had first entered. The knight was seated in a curious silver chair, to which he was bound by his ankles, his knees, his elbows, his wrists, and his waist. There was sweat on his forehead, and his face was filled with anguish. Come in, friends, he said, glancing quickly up. The fit is not yet upon me. Make no noise, for I told that prying chamberlain you were in bed. Now, I can feel it coming. Quick, listen while I am master of myself. When the fit is upon me, it may well be that I shall beg and implore you, with entreaties and threatenings, to loosen my bonds. They say I do. I shall call upon you by all that is most dear and most dreadful. But do not listen to me. Harden your hearts and stop your ears. For while I am bound, you are safe. But if once I were up and out of this chair, then first would come my fury, and after that, he shuddered, the change into a loathsome serpent. There's no fear of us loosening you, said Puddleglum. We've no wish to meet wild men or serpents either. I should think not, said Scrub and Jill together. All the same, added Puddleglum in a whisper, don't let's be too sure. Let's be on our guard. We've muffed everything else, you know. He'll be cunning, I shouldn't wonder, once he gets started. Can we trust one another? Do we all promise that whatever he says, we don't touch those cords? Whatever he says, mind you. Rather, said Scrub. There's nothing in the world he can say or do that'll make me change my mind, said Jill. Hush! Something's happening, said Puddleglum. The knight was moaning, His face was as pale as putty, and he writhed in his bonds. And whether because she was sorry for him, or for some other reason, Jill thought that he looked a nicer sort of man than he had looked before.
"Ah," he groaned, "enchantments, enchantments. The heavy, tangled, cold, clammy web of evil magic. Buried alive, dragged down under the earth, down into the sooty blackness. How many years is it? Have I lived 10 years, or 1,000 years in the pit? Maggot men all around me. Oh, have mercy. Let me out. Let me out. Let me feel the wind and see the sky. There used to be a little pool. When you looked down into it, you could see all the trees growing upside down in the water, all green, and below them, deep, very deep, the blue sky."
He had been speaking in a low voice, and now he looked up, fixed his eyes upon them, and said loud and clear,
"Quick! I am sane now. Every night I am sane. If only I could get out of this enchanted chair, it would last. I should be a man again. But every night they bind me, and so every night my chance is gone. But you are not enemies. I am not your prisoner. Quick, cut these cords. Steadfast, steady," said Puddleglum to the two children. "I beseech you to hear me," said the knight, forcing himself to speak calmly. "Have they told you that if I am released from this chair, I will kill you and become a serpent? I see by your faces that they have. It is a lie. It is at this hour that I am in my right mind. It is all the rest of the day that I am enchanted. You are not earthmen nor witches. Why should you be on their side? Of your courtesy, cut my bonds."
"Steady, steady, steady," said the three travelers to one another.
"Oh, you have hearts of stone," said the knight. "Believe me, you look upon a wretch who has suffered almost more than any mortal heart can bear. What wrong have I ever done you that you would side with my enemies to keep me in such miseries? And the minutes are slipping past. Now you can save me. When this hour is past, I shall be witless again, the toy and lapdog, nay, more likely the pawn and tool of the most devilish sorceress that ever planned the woe of men. And this night of all nights, when she is away, you take from me a chance that may never come again."
"This is dreadful. I do wish we'd stayed away till it was over," said Jill.
"Steady," said
Puddleglum. The prisoner's voice was now rising into a shriek.
"Let me go, I say! Give me my sword! My sword! Once I am free, I shall take such revenge on Earthmen that Underland will talk of it for 1,000 years!"
"Now the frenzy is beginning," said Scrub. "I hope those knots are all right."
"Yes," said Puddleglum. "He'd have twice his natural strength if he got free now. And I'm not very clever with my sword. He'd get us both, I shouldn't wonder, and then Pole on her own would be left to tackle the snake."
The prisoner was now so straining at his bonds that they cut into his wrists and ankles.
"Beware," he said, "beware! One night I did break them, but the witch was there that time. You will not have her to help you tonight. Free me now, and I am your friend. I'm your mortal enemy, else." "Cunning, isn't he?" said Puddleglum. "Once and for all," said the prisoner, "I adjure you to set me free. By all fears and all loves, by the bright skies of Overland, by the great lion, by Aslan himself, I charge you."
"Oh!" cried the three travelers, as though they had been hurt.
"It's the sign," said Puddleglum.
"It was the words of the sign," said Scrub more cautiously. "Oh, what are we to do?" said Jill. It was a dreadful question. What had been the use of promising one another that they would not on any account set the knight free, if they were now to do so the first time he happened to call upon a name they really cared about? On the other hand, what had been the use of learning the signs if they weren't going to obey them? Yet could Aslan have really meant them to unbind anyone, even a lunatic who asked it in his name? Could it be a mere accident? Or how if the queen of the underworld knew about all the signs and had made the knight learn this name simply in order to entrap them? But then, supposing this was the real sign, they had muffed 3 already. They daredn't muff the 4th. Oh, if only we knew.
I think we do know,
said Puddleglum. You mean you think everything will come right if we do untie him? Said Scrub.
I don't know about that, said Puddleglum. You see, Aslan didn't tell Pole what would happen. He only told her what to do. That fellow will be the death of us once he's up, I shouldn't wonder. But that doesn't let us off following the sign.
They all stood looking at one another with bright eyes. It was a sickening moment. All right, said Jill suddenly. Let's get it over. Goodbye, everyone. They all shook hands. The knight was screaming by now. There was froth on his cheeks.
Come on, Scrub, said Puddleglum.
He and Scrub drew their swords and went over to the captive. In the name of Aslan, they said, and began methodically cutting the cords. The instant the prisoner was free, he crossed the room in a single bound, seized his own sword, which had been taken from him, and laid on the table and drew it. You first, he cried, and fell upon the silver chair. That must have been a good sword. The silver gave way before its edge like string, and in a moment a few twisted fragments shining on the floor were all that was left. But as the chair broke, there came from it a blinding flash, a sound like small thunder, and, for one moment, a loathsome smell.
Lie there, vile engine of sorcery, he said, lest your mistress should ever use you for another victim.
Then he turned and surveyed his rescuers, and the something wrong, whatever it was, had vanished from his face.
What?
He cried, turning to Puddleglum.
Do I see before me a marshwiggle? A real, live, honest Narnian marshwiggle? Oh, so you have heard of Narnia?
Oh, so you have heard of Narnia after all, said Jill.
Had I forgotten it when I was under the spell? Asked the knight. Well, that and all other bedevilments are now over. You may well believe that I know Narnia, for I am Rillian, Prince of Narnia, and Caspian, the great king, is my father. Your Royal Highness, said Puddleglum, sinking on one knee, and the children did the same. We have come hither for no other end than to seek you. And who are you, my other deliverers? Said the prince to Scrub and Jill.
We were sent by Aslan himself from beyond the world's end to seek your highness, said Scrub. I am Eustace, who sailed with him to the Isle of Ramadou.
I owe all 3 of you a greater debt than I can ever pay, said Prince Rillian. But my father, is he yet alive? He sailed east again before we left Narnia, my lord, said Puddleglum. But your highness must consider that the king is very old. It is 10 to 1 his majesty must die on the voyage. He is old, you say? How long, then, have I been in the power of the witch? It is more than 10 years since your highness was lost in the woods at the north side of Narnia. 10 years, said the prince, drawing his hand across his face as if to rub away the past. Yes, I believe you. For now that I am myself, I can remember that enchanted life, though while I was enchanted, I could not remember my true self. And now, fair friends, but wait, I hear their feet. Does it not sicken a man, that padding, woolly tread? Fa! On the stairs. Lock the door, boy, or stay. I have a better thought than that. I will fool these earthmen if Aslan gives me the wit. Take your cue from me. He walked resolutely to the door and flung it wide open. The Chronicles of Narnia by C.S. Lewis. Book 4, The Silver Chair. Chapter 12, The Queen of Underland.
2 earthmen entered, but instead of advancing into the room, they placed themselves one on each side of the door and bowed deeply. They were followed immediately by the last person whom anyone had expected or wished to see. the Lady of the Green Kirtle, the Queen of Underland. She stood dead still in the doorway, and they could see her eyes moving as she took in the whole situation. The three strangers, the silver chair destroyed, and the prince free with his sword in his hand. She turned very white, but Jill thought it was the sort of whiteness that comes over some people's faces, not when they are frightened, but when they are angry. For a moment, the witch fixed her eyes on the prince, and there was murder in them. Then she seemed to change her mind. "Leave us," she said to the two earthmen, "and let none disturb us till I call, on pain of death." The gnomes padded away obediently, and the witch queen shut and locked the door. "How now, my lord prince," she said. "Has your nightly fit not yet come upon you, or is it over so soon? Why stand you here unbound? Who are these aliens? And is it they who have destroyed the chair which was your only safety?" Prince Rilian shivered as she spoke to him, and no wonder. It is not easy to throw off in half an hour an enchantment which has made one a slave for 10 years. Then, speaking with a great effort, he said,
"Madam, there will be no more need for that chair. And you, who have told me 100 times how deeply you pitied me for the sorceries by which I was bound, will doubtless hear with joy that they are now ended forever. There was, it seems, some small error in your ladyship's way of treating them. These, my true friends, have delivered me. I am now in my right mind, and there are two things I will say to you. First, as for your ladyship's design of putting me at the head of an army of earthmen so that I may break out into the overworld and there, by main force, make myself king over some nation that never did me wrong, murdering their natural lords and holding their throne as a bloody and foreign tyrant, now that I know myself, I do utterly abhor and renounce it as plain villainy. And second, I am the king's son of Narnia, Rilian, the only child of Caspian, 10th of that name, whom some call Caspian the Seafarer. Therefore, madam, it is my purpose, as it is also my duty, to depart suddenly from your highness's court into my own country. Please it you to grant me and my friends safe conduct and a guide through your dark realm." Now the witch said nothing at all, but moved gently across the room, always keeping her face and eyes very steadily towards the prince. When she had come to a little ark set in the wall not far from the fireplace, she opened it and took out first a handful of green powder. This she threw on the fire. It did not blaze much, but a very sweet and drowsy smell came from it. And all through the conversation which followed, that smell grew stronger and filled the room and made it harder to think. Secondly, she took out a musical instrument, rather like a mandolin. She began to play it with her fingers. A steady, monotonous thrumming that you didn't notice after a few minutes. But the less you noticed it, the more it got into your brain and your blood. This also made it hard to think. After she had thrummed for a time, and the sweet smell was now strong, she began speaking in a sweet, quiet voice. "Narnia," she said. "Narnia? I have often heard your lordship utter that name in your ravings. Dear prince, you are very sick. There is no land called Narnia." "Yes, there is, though, ma'am," said Puddleglum. "You see, I happen to have lived there all my life."
"Indeed," said the witch. "Tell me, I pray you, where that country is."
"Up there," said Puddleglum stoutly, pointing overhead. I don't know exactly where."
"How?" said the queen with a kind, soft, musical laugh. "Is there a country up among the stones and mortar of the roof?"
"No,"
said Puddleglum, struggling a little to get his breath.
"It's in the overworld."
"And what or where, pray, is this, how do you call it, overworld?" "Oh, don't be so silly," said Scrub, who was fighting hard against the enchantment of the sweet smell and the thrumming. "As if you didn't know. It's up above, up where you can see the sky and the sun and the stars. Why, you've been there yourself. We met you there." I cry you mercy, little brother, laughed the witch. You couldn't have heard a lovelier laugh. I have no memory of that meeting, but we often meet our friends in strange places when we dream, and unless all dream alike, you must not ask them to remember it.
Madam, said the prince sternly, I've already told your grace that I am the king's son of Narnia.
And shalt be, dear friend, said the witch in a soothing voice, as if she were humoring a child. Shalt be king of many imagined lands in thy fancies. We've been there too, snapped Jill. She was very angry because she could feel enchantment getting hold of her every moment. But of course, the very fact that she could still feel it showed that it had not yet fully worked. And thou art queen of Narnia too, I doubt not, pretty one, said the witch in the same coaxing, half-mocking tone. I am nothing of the sort, said Jill, stamping her foot. We come from another world. Why, this is a prettier game than the other, said the witch. Tell us, little maid, where is this other world? What ships and chariots go between it and ours? Of course, a lot of things darted into Jill's head at once. Experiment house, Adelia Pennyfeather, her own home, radio sets, cinemas, cars, aeroplanes, ration books, queues, but they seemed dim and far away. Thrum, 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 went the strings of the witch's instrument. Jill couldn't remember the names of the things in our world, and this time it didn't come into her head that she was being enchanted, for now the magic was in its full strength. And of course, the more enchanted you get, the more certain you feel that you are not enchanted at all. She found herself saying, and at the moment it was a relief to say, No, I suppose that other world must be all a dream. Yes, it is all a dream, said the witch, always thrumming. Yes, a dream, said Jill. There never was such a world, said the witch. No, said Jill and Scrub. Never was such a world. There never was any world but mine, said the witch. There never was any world but yours, said they. Puddleglum was still fighting hard. I don't know rightly what you all mean by a world, he said, talking like a man who hasn't enough air. But you can play that fiddle till your fingers drop off, and still you won't make me forget Narnia, and the whole Overland too. We'll never see it again, I shouldn't wonder. You may have blotted it out and turned it black like this, for all I know. Nothing more likely. But I know I was there once. I've seen the sky full of stars. I've seen the sun coming up out of the sea of a morning and sinking behind the mountains at night. And I've seen him up in the midday sky when I couldn't look up at him for brightness. Puddleglum's words had a very rousing effect. The other three all breathed again and looked at one another like people newly awakened. Why, there it is, cried the prince. Of course, the blessing of Aslan upon this honest Marshwiggle. We've all been dreaming these last few minutes. How could we have forgotten it? Of course we've all seen the sun. By Jove, so we have, said Scrub. Good for you, Puddleglum. You're the only one of us with any sense, I do believe. Then came the witch's voice, cooing softly like the voice of a wood pigeon from the high elms in an old garden at 3 o'clock in the middle of a sleepy summer afternoon. And it said, What is this sun that you all speak of? Do you mean anything by the word? Yes, we jolly well do, said Scrub. Can you tell me what it's like? Asked the witch. Thrum, 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 went the strings. Please, your grace, said the prince, very coldly and politely. You see that lamp? It is round and yellow and gives light to the whole room, and hangeth moreover from the roof. Now that thing which we call the sun is like the lamp, only far greater and brighter. It giveth light to the whole overworld, and hangeth in the sky. Hangeth from what, my lord? Asked the witch. And then, while they were all still thinking how to answer her, she added with another of her soft silver laughs, You see, when you try to think out clearly what this sun must be, you cannot tell me. You can only tell me it is like the lamp. Your sun is a dream, and there is nothing in that dream that is not copied from the lamp. The lamp is the real thing. The sun is but a tale, a children's story. Yes, I see now, said Jill in a heavy, hopeless tone. It must be so. And while she said this, it seemed to her to be very good sense. Slowly and gravely, the witch repeated, There is no sun. And they all said nothing. She repeated in a softer and deeper voice, There is no sun. After a pause, and after a struggle in their minds, all four of them said together, You are right. There is no sun. It was such a relief to give in and say it. There never was a sun, said the witch. No, there never was a sun, said the prince and the marshwiggle and the children. For the last few minutes, Jill had been feeling that there was something she must remember at all costs, and now she did, but it was dreadfully hard to say. She felt as if huge weights were laid on her lips. At last, with an effort that seemed to take all the good out of her, she said, There's Aslan. Aslan, said the witch, quickening ever so slightly the pace of her thrumming. What a pretty name. What does it mean? He's the great lion who called us out of our own world, said Scrub, and sent us into this to find Prince Rillian. What is a lion? Asked the witch. Oh, hang it all, said Scrub. Don't you know? How can we describe it to her? Have you ever seen a cat? Surely, said the queen. I love cats. Well, a lion is a little bit, only a little bit, mind you, like a huge cat with a mane. At least, it's not like a horse's mane, you know. It's more like a judge's wig, and it's yellow and terrifically strong. The witch shook her head. I see, she said, that we should do no better with your lion, as you call it, than we did with your sun. You have seen lamps, and so you imagined a bigger and better lamp and called it the sun. You've seen cats, and now you want a bigger and better cat, and it's to be called a lion. Well, 'tis a pretty make-believe, though to say truth, it would suit you all better if you were younger. And look how you can put nothing into your make-believe without copying it from the real world of mine, which is the only world. But even you children are too old for such play. As for you, my lord prince, thou art a man full grown. Fie upon you! Are you not ashamed of such toys? Come, all of you, put away these childish tricks. I have work for you all in the real world. There is no Narnia, no overworld, no sky, no sun, no Aslan. And now, to bed all, and let us begin a wiser life tomorrow. But first, to bed, to sleep, deep sleep, soft pillows, sleep without foolish dreams. The prince and the two children were standing with their heads hung down, their cheeks flushed, their eyes half closed, the strength all but gone from them, the enchantment almost complete. But Puddleglum, desperately gathering all his strength, walked over to the fire. Then he did a very brave thing. He knew it wouldn't hurt him quite as much as it would hurt a human, for his feet, which were bare, were webbed and hard and cold-blooded like a duck's. But he knew it would hurt him badly enough, and so it did. With his bare foot, he stamped on the fire, grinding a large part of it into ashes on the flat hearth. And three things happened at once. First, the sweet, heavy smell grew very much less, for though the whole fire had not been put out, a good bit of it had, and what remained smelled very largely of burnt marshwiggle, which is not at all an enchanting smell. This instantly made everyone's brain far clearer. The prince and the children held up their heads again and opened their eyes. Secondly, the witch, in a loud, terrible voice, utterly different from all the sweet tones she had been using up till now, called out, "What are you doing? Dare you touch my fire again, mud filth, and I'll turn the blood to fire inside your veins!" Thirdly, the pain itself made Puddleglum's head for a moment perfectly clear, and he knew exactly what he really thought. There is nothing like a good shock of pain for dissolving certain kinds of magic. "One word, ma'am," he said, coming back from the fire, limping because of the pain. "One word? All you've been saying is quite right, I shouldn't wonder. I'm a chap who always liked to know the worst and then put the best face I can on it, so I won't deny any of what you said. But there's one thing more to be said, even so. Suppose we have only dreamed or made up all those things. Trees and grass and sun and moon and stars and Aslan himself. Suppose we have. Then all I can say is that, in that case, the made-up things seem a good deal more important than the real ones. Suppose this black pit of a kingdom of yours is the only world. Well, it strikes me as a pretty poor one. And that's a funny thing when you come to think of it. We're just babies making up a game, if you're right. Before babies playing a game can make a play world which licks your real world hollow. That's why I'm going to stand by the play world. I'm on Aslan's side, even if there isn't any Aslan to lead it. I'm going to live as like a Narnian as I can, even if there isn't any Narnia. So thanking you kindly for your supper, if these two gentlemen and the young lady are ready, we're leaving your court at once and setting out in the dark to spend our lives looking for the Overland. Not that our lives will be very long, I should think, but that's a small loss if the world's as dull a place as you say." "Oh, hooray! Good old Puddleglum!" cried Scrub and Jill. But the prince shouted suddenly,
"Where? Look at the witch!"
When they did look, their hair nearly stood on end. The instrument dropped from her hands. Her arms appeared to be fastened to her sides. Her legs were intertwined with each other, and her feet had disappeared. The long green train of her skirt thickened and grew solid, and seemed to be all one piece with the withering green pillar of her interlocked legs. And that writhing green pillar was curving and swaying as if it had no joints, or else were all joints. Her head was thrown back, and while her nose grew longer and longer, every part of her face seemed to disappear, except her eyes. Huge, flaming eyes that were now without brows or lashes. All this takes time to write down. It happened so quickly that there was only just time to see it. Long before there was time to do anything, the change was complete, and the great serpent which the witch had become, green as poison, thick as Jill's waist, had flung 2 or 3 coils of its loathsome body round the prince's legs. Quick as lightning, another great loop darted round, intending to pinion his sword arm to his side. But the prince was just in time. He raised his arms and got them clear. The living knot closed only round his chest, ready to crack his ribs like firewood when it drew tight. The prince caught the creature's neck in his left hand, trying to squeeze it till it choked. This held its face, if you could call it a face, about 5 inches from his own. The forked tongue flicked horribly in and out, but could not reach him. With his right hand, he drew back his sword for the strongest blow he could give. Meanwhile, Scrub and Puddleglum had drawn their weapons and rushed to his aid. All 3 blows fell at once. Scrub's, which did not even pierce the scales and did no good, on the body of the snake below the prince's hand, but the prince's own blow and Puddleglum's both on its neck. Even that did not quite kill it, though it began to loosen its hold on Rillian's legs and chest. With repeated blows, they hacked off its head. The horrible thing went on coiling and moving like a bit of wire long after it had died, and the floor, as you may imagine, was a nasty mess. The prince, when he had his breath, said,
"Gentlemen, I thank you."
Then the 3 conquerors stood staring at one another and panting without another word for a long time. Jill had very wisely sat down and was keeping quiet. She was saying to herself, I do hope I don't faint, or blub, or do anything idiotic.
My royal mother is avenged, said William presently. This is undoubtedly the same worm that I pursued in vain by the fountain in the forest of Narnia so many years ago. All these years I've been the slave to my mother's slayer. Yet I am glad, gentlemen, that the foul witch took to her serpent form at the last. It would not have suited well either with my heart or with my honor to have slain a woman. But look to the lady.
He meant Jill. I'm all right, thanks, said she.
Damsel, said the prince, bowing to her, you are of a high courage, and therefore, I doubt not, you come of a royal blood in your own world. But come, friends, here is some wine left. Let us refresh ourselves, and each pledge his fellows. After that, to our plans.
A jolly good idea, sir, said Scrub.